memory and imagination, and the entanglement of dreaming, memory, and imagination, I guess. Sharon, you read the first 3 or 4.
She had been dreaming through the day, but now memories came flooding back. Interspersed by imaginative projections, images appeared to form a cushion as she drifted into sleep, and those images formed into fragments of dreams. The Generomantics, Schelling and Hegel, constructed the notion of the unconscious in order to overcome the division between subjectivity and nature, and the dualism of mind and body. Hegel's elaboration of the theory of the imagination anticipated Freud, who was familiar with this, can't see the rest.
Philosophical heritage.
Mm-hmm.
As Goya, the sleep of reason produces monsters. This is late 18th century. Henry Fuseli, The Nightmare from 1877. It can't be. It should be 1787.
The dream is a fragment. The main figure of German Romanticism is the fragment, and the theorist Stella Stanford relates the fragment to the dream. The conceptual logic of the fragment is also at work in the dream. More specifically, with the concept of the fragment, one of the two competing characterizations of the dream in Freud's The Interpretation of Dreams is illuminated and made compelling. Freud equivocates between, on the one hand, a theory in which a dream is the hallucinated fulfillment of a perfectly coherent and rational wish, discoverable through interpretation, and, on the other, a theory in which a dream is the fragmentary form of appearance of the incalculable, effectively infinite relations of the totality of psychic activity and its outside, and of the relation to the unknowable.
Fuseli, 1793, The Shepherd's Dream from Paradise Lost.
When Hegel theorized the imagination, he figured it as dividing into dialectical relationship of two sides, the night representing inwardizing consciousness and the light of the externalizing material. In the first instance, consciousness apprehends the object through the process of inwardizing in order to create an image stored within the night. This enables consciousness to recollect something as if familiar, thus in turn creating the ability to exhibit relation between images. The object or image still does not possess any essence of the self because there is no fixed point of destination, out of which a map might be drawn of its travels. Hegel describes the night as a form of safekeeping or storing up. Freud believed that a dream is somewhat like psychosis, sharing with it a short duration, as well as absurdity or delusion. We could easily come to this comparison to imagine that the culture itself, being subject to so much turbulence, is in a bad dream syndrome from which it will eventually awake.
Hey, you're next. Kate.
In 1953, Aserinsky and Kleitman discovered that within sleep, that there was a period of heightened brain activity accompanied by rapid eye movements, REM, every 90 minutes. These REM states signify dream states. Dreams are biorhythmically produced, stimulated by a release of chemical messenger called acetylcholine. Angela Napin, how do you say her name? Water dream.
It's Aboriginal.
The dream time is a commonly used term for describing important figures of Aboriginal spiritual beliefs and existence. It is not generally well understood by non-Indigenous people. Aboriginals believe that the dream time was way back at the very beginning. The land and the people were created by the spirits. They made the rivers, streams, water holes, the land, hills, rocks, plants, and animals. It is believed that the spirits gave them their hunting tools and each tribe its land, their totems, and their dreaming. The Aboriginals believed that the entire world was made by their ancestors way back in the very beginning of time, the dream time.
The diagrammatics of Aboriginal sort of mapping of the land and their way of being.
Memory has no separate organ in the brain, so it is not a form of storage space. Rather, it is a neural achievement of nerve cells working associatively within a network of chains, generating neurochemical reactions. Memory creates pathways through the nervous system based on repeated patterns, and then through a process of association.
Implication of this is that memory isn't a fixed object. It constantly reconfigures itself. Each and every time it's a different memory, even if in nuances. So there's always a tension between those who think memory is fixed, it's a sort of an object in itself, and those who see memory as contingent upon brain activity, and so there's no place where memory is stored.
Carry on.
Keep going.
Fayum portraits record a living resemblance of beings who have passed through to the realm of the dead. The journey of the soul was the principal object of Egyptian culture. These portraits serve as a meeting point of memory and imagination, in which the memory of the living appearance fuses with the gaze of the departed soul in the journey into the afterlife.
There's numerous examples of Fayum portraits in the Louvre. They occasionally have one in the National Gallery. But they are some of the earliest portraits, so they're Greek in origin, but they were appropriated by the Romans and fused with Egyptian burial culture.
And Jonathan, are they painted onto wood?
They're painted onto wood, and they're put on the sarcophagus or the coffin for the dead. So it's almost like they were living representations of those who became deceased. So they have this kind of strange dynamic between livingness and deadness, between the gaze and the look.
Sorry, this is from the 1st century BC.
Yeah, to 3rd century AD.
And what sort of level in society would they have been painted? The people, they're not obviously pharaohs and kings and.
It's got a sort of feeling of everyday life.
Yeah.
So anyone who was buried could be painted.
It looks very modern, the haircut and the color, like.
I remember the first time I had some slides when I was teaching at St. Martin's years ago. And I sort of showed them and made up a story that they were modern portraits, and everyone thought they were extraordinary portraits. When I told them that they were about the time of Christ, they wouldn't believe me. Giacometti was much taken by them. He liked the frontality and the sort of the stare or the gaze, looking back.
And are they a type of tempera? How were they painted?
I'm not sure. They're not. It's not all paint, so it'd be a form of tempera, I'm sure.
Mm.
This is a Gupta period, which is one of the heights of Indian stone carving. It's Vishnu, Vishnu sleeping. The three main gods of Hinduism is Vishnu, Brahma is the creator, Vishnu is the kind of balances the energy, and Shiva the destroyer. So Vishnu, one of his reincarnations is a Buddha, and it's ninth reincarnation. Who's next to read? Jessica.
The human mind is set up to take no account of chance, except insofar as the calculations that eliminate chance allow you to forget it, not to take it into account. But going as far as possible, reflections on chance strips the world bare entirely of predictions in which reason encloses it. Like human nakedness, the nakedness of chance, which in the last resort is definitive, is obscene and disgusting, in short, divine.
It's George retired. This is Kamakura period. This is from the 12th, 13th century, a dream diary. Kamakura period was one of the great Buddhist periods in Japanese culture, from the 12th to 14th century, roughly the same time as the Song dynasty in China. A little bit later, but a dream journey to Peach Blossom Spring, Joseon dynasty, mid-15th century. You've got a passage through a landscape, so you haven't got a fixed period of time. It's sort of drift work, different encounters, and this is Albert Dürer, 1525, a record of a dream of a kind of flood. One of his great visionary jottings in a notebook.
In a well-heated room, as suggested by the stove, instead of working, an old man falls asleep on a bench. The devil inspires the materialization of a vision in the form of a classical Venus, recognizable also by the presence of Cupid. The latter is depicted in the act of climbing on stilts. Further suggestion that in an old man, lasciviousness, as well as sinful, is futile.
Dürer, Dream of a Doctor. The Dream of a Young Girl, painted by Lorenzo Lotto around 1505. The relationship of modernity and dreaming acts as a counterpoint to the rationalization process.
History and memory imply a close conceptual fit, but with modernity, there is invariably a rupture between memory and history. Bergson, Freud, and Proust each represent the historical metamorphosis of memory under the sign of discontinuity. In Manet's A Bar at the Foire Bergère, the central figure appears to figure not only reification or dislocation, but also the trace of amnesia which indicates a severing of memory and history. The mirror might reflect a totality of the view, but perhaps she looks into a vacant distance. She presents a condition below the surface of inscription. She is elsewhere to the objects that are in her immediate surround.
In a way, that becomes the look of modernity. Sort of feeling of loss of centeredness. Looking elsewhere, estrangement of location, something adrift. This is Max Klinger, The Glove, in 1881. He did this extraordinary series of prints in which a glove is dropped and it goes a walk around through the night. So there's, I think, something like 10 to 12 prints in a sequence, and it sort of anticipates not just the psychological activity of free association and dream work, but also is a kind of precursor of animation. These are two of the prints. Odilon Redon, The Dream, symbolist, late 19th century. Gauguin's sketchbooks combine drawings, notes, graphic images in ways that suggest a switching of modes of association with it, which anticipate collage or montage. As a whole, it corresponds to a form of dream work in terms of the method which is opened by it. Gauguin, 1897, The Dream. Henry Rousseau, The Dream, 1910. Next reader.
He that has eyes to see and ears to hear may convince himself that no mortal can keep a secret. If his lips are silent, he chatters with his fingertips. Betrayal oozes out of him at every pore. Sigmund Freud. It is known that Freud did everything possible to not neglect the experience of haunting, spectrality, phantoms, ghosts. He tried to account for them, courageously in a scientific, critical, and positive a fashion as possible. I can't read the last bit.
But by doing that, he also tries to conjure them. Like Marx, his scientific positivism was put in the service of the declared hauntedness of this avowed fear. Derrida, Archive Fever. Thank you.
The task of dream interpretation is to unravel what the dream work has woven. Freud viewed dreams as the royal road to the unconscious. There are 4 aspects of dream work: condensation, a number of dream elements, themes, images, figures, ideas, etc. are combined into one. Displacement, a dream might seem to be about one thing, but the dream thoughts can show it was really about something else. Secondary revision. Freud says that it is the function of secondary revision to create this appearance of narrative coherence. It fills up the gaps in the dream structure with shreds and patches. Considerations of representation. Dreams work in images, so the abstract thoughts which might underlie the dream must be turned into a pictorial and concrete language before they can be used in a dream. Sigmund Freud defined dreams as primitive thought activity. A dream's inner life consists of 2 mechanisms: condensation and displacement. The dream has a very striking way of dealing with the category of opposites and contradictions. This is simply disregarded. To the dream, no does not seem to exist. To the dream, no does not seem to exist. Freud wrote in The Interpretation of Dreams that the psyche resembles a compound microscope or photographic apparatus. Psychic images are virtual rather than real, the word which Freud consistently uses to refer to the image toward whose production the psyche moves is Sachvorstellung, or thing representation. Vorstellung can be translated as representation or presentation, and Sache in its verbal form means to position or to stand before. I would photograph an idea rather than an object, a dream rather than an idea.
Man Ray, Dora Maar, 1936. Next reader. Would like to read.
In Freud, the unconscious is in possession a temporality called Zeitlos, or timeless. What? Zeitlos, or timeless. The time of death is not that time, or a time of nothing, but has its own time, a mode of time in which death is a scandalos, or a detained temporality. It is because the immanence of that time, in bound living time, that psychoanalytical temporality is provided with an archaic. Against the flow of time, memory, according to Freud, is a lasting trace, spur of excitation, and as such, memory is unconscious. It is also the crossroads of energy and representation, heterogeneity. The memory trace, whose repetition is unaware of time, can sometimes seep into very concealed, elaborate, and sublimatory formations that marks them with the unsettling strangeness of the atemporal.
Twitching Machine by Paul Klee from 1922.
Paul Klee stated that my fervor is more like that of the dead of the yet unborn. I adopt a distant, original standpoint where I presuppose formulas for men, animals, plants, rocks, and the elements for all the circulating forces at once. 1,000 questions fall silent before they are answered. As beautiful as the chance encounter of a sewing machine and an umbrella on an operating table.
L'Entremont was a great symbolist writer who was a big influence on Surrealist ideas. So that was one of the most quoted lines in Surrealist manifestos. As beautiful as the chance encounter of a sewing machine and an umbrella on an operating table.
Who am I, if this once I were to rely on a proverb? Perhaps everything would amount to knowing who I haunt. Nadia Andrew Britton.
Nadia was one of the great novels of the Surrealist period. You don't know whether it's pursuing ghosts through the streets of Paris or a real person. There's this feeling that Paris at this time was a city of ghosts. You find this theme in Walter Benjamin, particularly in Breton.
Once upon a time, I dreamed I was a butterfly, fluttering hither and thither, to all intents and purposes a butterfly. I was conscious only of my happiness as a butterfly, aware that I was myself. Soon I awoke awaked, and there I was, veritably myself again. Now I do not know whether I was then a man dreaming I was a butterfly, or whether I am now a butterfly, dreaming I am a man. 庄子。
When the artist finds himself, he is lost. The fact that he has succeeded in never finding himself is regarded by Max Ernst as his only lasting achievement. Max Ernst. Who would like to read? Next person.
I'll do that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Hallucinations are borderline states indicating a transitional state from perception to imagination. Hallucination is thought's first form and dreamside's trace or remainder, which serve to open up space for imagination. Collages that employ the assemblages of 19th century Victorian prints.
Who's the Max Ernst? Max.
Is that a week in De Bronte?
Max Ernst.
Okay, the beautiful is an invention of singularity which circulates and reveals itself as common in the multiplicity of subjects who participate in the construction of the world. The beautiful is not the act of imagining, but an imagination that has become action. Art in this sense is multitude. Antonia Negri, Art and Multitude.
Negri. Wrote a great book, Time for Revolution, which is worth looking at on temporality in particular. It's Dorothy Tunning, birthday, 1942. This is Dorothy Tunning, Chamber.
Okay. To avoid the transitional error of constructing imagination as a secondary meditation between body and mind, Kant introduces his famous distinction between its productive and reproductive aspects. The reproductive function enables the mind to connect the diverse impressions of the senses by reinstating a preceding perception alongside a subsequent one, therefore forming a sequence of perceptions. But this reproductive role is in turn guided but a more fundamental role which provides the rule, according to which certain combinations of perceptions are preferred to others, independently of their empirical order of appearance, and it is this autonomous act of synthesis which Kant ascribes to the productive imagination.
Like Kant privileges the imagination as a faculty above all other faculties. So it's the root of knowledge, the origin. Darwin's Persistence of Memory, 1971.
Last one. We always think of imagination as a faculty that forms images. On the contrary, it deforms what we perceive. It is, above all, the faculty that frees us from immediate images and changes them.
Gaston Bachelard. Who's next?
The optical unconscious. The idea of the optical unconscious was first developed by Walter Benjamin in the 1930s in his work on photography. The camera introduces us to unconscious optics, as does psychoanalysis to unconscious impulses. Everyone knows from dreams the horror of doors that will not close. More precisely, there are doors that seem locked without being so. In an intensified way, I made the acquaintance of this phenomenon in a dream in which I, accompanied by a friend, encountered a ghost in the window of the first floor of a house to our right. And as we proceeded, it accompanied us through the interior of all houses. It walked through walls, always keeping in line abreast with us. I saw this even though I was blind. The stroll we take through the arcades, Passagen, it's basically such a ghostly path. Gespensterweg, in which the doors give way and the walls move. What's that word? Gespensterweg, is it?
It obviously translated the ghostly path, but Clara?
Yeah, right. It's Gespensterweg. You pronounced it right.
What does it mean?
Yeah, ghostly. Gespenster is ghost, and Weg is way.
Way of the ghosts.
Yeah.
The German language possesses no native term to describe the forms, Gestalten, of the imagination. Only the word manifestation, Erscheinung. Clara, can you pronounce that?
Erscheinung.
May, in one specific sense, be regarded as such. And in fact, imagination has nothing to do with forms or formations. It does indeed take its manifestations from them, but the connection between them and the imagination is far from being inexorable, that we might rather describe the manifestations of the imagination as the deforming, Entstaltung, of what has been formed. Walter Benjamin, Imagination. Man Ray, Woman with Long Hair, 1929. The dialectical image. It is not the case that things past. It is not the case that things past shed their light on present things. Not that present things shed their light on things past, but the image is that moment where the past enters like a lightning bolt into the constellation with the now. In other words, image is dialectics in a standstill. Walter Benjamin. Alfred Hitchcock, Spellbound.
Designed by Dolly. Hans Richter, Dreams That Money Can Buy.
Consciousness is not what it is, and what it is not. Jean-Paul Sartre. The dream is not fiction taken for reality. It is the odyssey of a consciousness committed by itself, and in spite of itself, to give form only to an unreal world. The dream is a privileged experience which can help us to conceive what a consciousness would be like, which had lost its being in the world, and which as a result would be deprived of the category of the real. Jean-Paul Sartre, L'Imaginaire. Roger Libet, Une Regrettable Affair, 1947. Imaginative experience posits a thing that is not a thing. Imaginative consciousness is the consciousness targeting something that is not.
Who's next?
Should I try?
Yeah.
I abandon myself to the favor of dreams in search for new laws. Antonin Artaud. The mind was dreaming, the world was its dream. George Louis Borges. Borges. Dream tigers. In 1921, Cornell began to work in New York as door-to-door fabric salesman. He also began to explore the city far and wide, discovering shops and markets crammed with knickknacks and objects from all over the planet. He became a collector of postcards, books, newspapers, sand and stones in bottles, old games, maps, and gradually he discovered the joy of assembling them to create a world of fantasy encased in wooden and glass boxes. My witness is the empty sky, Jack Kerouac. The only people for me are the mad ones, the ones who are mad to live, mad to talk, mad to be saved, desirous of everything at the same time, the ones who never yawn or say a commonplace thing, but burn, burn, burn like fabulous yellow Roman candles, exploding like spiders across the stars, and in the middle, you.
He wrote on the road, he wrote in a continuous scroll. That's the book in the scroll form.
In the film La Jetée, Chris Marker creates a disturbing post-apocalyptic scenario in which survivors of the devastation are used to reach out to other times by virtue of having powerful memories. Godard created his film Alphaville as a critique of technology and its tendency to either transform or even erase memory. The idea of a pure technocracy present life without recollection or effective imagination. Here at Alphaville, their idea is a pure technocracy, an entirely technical society, like those of ants and termites. Dixon. Rauschenberg was insisting upon was a model of art that was not involved with what it might be called the cognitive moment, as in single image painting, but instead was tied to Dury, to the kind of extended temporality that is involved in experience like memory, reflection, narration, proposition. Rosalind Krauss. The American Dream.
New reader. Who's next?
Who's that?
We'll go back to the beginning then. Sharon.
Okay, The American Dream. California Dreaming. The Dream Factory. Timothy Leary, apostle of acid and, according to Richard Nixon, the most dangerous man in America. Spaced Out. Interior space explored in conjunction with outer space. The mining of dreams as the new frontier of consumer capitalism. The dream machine is viewed with the eyes closed. The pulsating light stimulates the optic nerve and thus alters the brain's electrical oscillations. Brian Gisson. Imagination is the key to my lyrics. The rest is painted with a little science fiction. Jimi Hendrix. Sleep, 1963. The first film created by Warhol was Sleep, which consisted of 8 hours of John Giorno asleep on a couch. The film is shot in real time, but it is projected at a slower speed, lending in the process a hallucinatory effect. For Debord, the image is a zone of undecidably between the true and the false. The image is exhibited as such, is no longer an image of anything. It is itself imageless, the refuge of all images.
Tarkovsky.
When film is not a document, it is a dream. That is why Tarkovsky is the greatest of them all. He moves with such naturalness in the room of dreams. He doesn't explain. What should be explained anyhow? He is a spectator, capable of staging his visions in the most unwieldy, but in a way, the most willing of media. Ingmar Bergman. You dream of one thing, but you get quite another.
I'm stalked by Tarkovsky. Tarkovsky.
My working hunch was that any memory, once it's fairly long, is more structured than it seems. That after a certain quantity, photos apparently taken by chance, postcards chosen according to a passing mood, begin to trace an itinerary, to map the imaginary country that stretches out before us. By going through it systematically, I was sure to discover the apparent disorder of my imagery concealed a chart, as in the Tales of Pirates. The object of this disc would be to present the guided tour of a memory, while at the same time offering the visitor a chance for haphazard navigation. So, welcome to Memory, Land of Contrasts, or rather, as I've chosen to call it, In Memory. Chris Marker. Imagination is seeing, or hearing, or feeling, or tasting, or smelling, double. To show you what you do not see, the body's inner forces. Francesca Woodman. Okay. If it, learning to live, remains to be done, it can happen only between life and death, neither in life nor in death alone. What happens between the two, and between all the twos one likes, such as between life and death, can only maintain itself with some ghost, can only talk with or about some ghost. Spectres of Marx, by Jacques Derrida. In a published paper, Ficus, Derrida discusses a dream by Walter Benjamin, which was described as changing a poem into fichu or making a scarf out of a poem. Derrida inquires about the difference between thinking and dreaming. He talks out the way Adorno says the most beautiful dreams are spoiled, injured, mutilated, damaged by waking consciousness. But Derrida goes on to speculate on the idea that dreaming were a more vigilant state than being awake, the unconscious more thoughtful than consciousness, literature or the arts more philosophical, more critical, at any rate, than philosophy. Under the possibility of this being the case, Derrida develops the notion of the possibility of the impossibility, and that the thought of such a notion might enable us to understand the potential of keeping alive the relationship between dream and thought.
That's one.
Painting doesn't freeze time. It circulates and recycles time like a wheel that turns. Those who were first might well be last. Painting is a very slow art. It doesn't travel with the speed of light. That's why dead painters shine so bright. Marlene Dumas.
Next.
In Jean-Francois Letard's writing, the figural both pertains to the force of figuration and disfiguration, a force that is linked to desire. This is linked to Freud and the idea that the dream thoughts figure in a way that make them appear as things. If the dream is the work of desire, then it is also the place where desire disfigures itself, and hence it is both a process of absenting and presensing. In the context of art, not only does art indicate the function of a figure, it is also in turn a refutation of discourse. The concept of time applies. I'm trying to recreate the imaginative visions of the architecture before the architect built the building, so I can trace back to the original vision from the finished project. Sugimoto. Right, Slid Schroederhaus.
All these photographs of architecture was commissioned to do the great modernist architects of world culture, and he photographed them all in a blurry, out of focus way of projecting the image, and all the images are faded off, out of focus or displaced.
While each memory has its own context, the light that strikes each of these appears in complex interplay inside me and is regenerated as a new memory of light, which in turn continues to require and presage the further stimulation of the next light and memory. The one place where all of these cycles of light and memory converge is history. Photographs are fossils of light and memory, and photographs are the history of memory. Daido Maruyama. The dream is not a discourse because the dream work is intrinsically different from the operations of speech. Lyotard. And this is Anselm Kiefer's The Renowned Orders of the Night, 1997. In his book, The Ground of the Image, Jean-Luc Nancy discusses the deep ambivalence of the image. For Nancy, there is always something that appears outside the boundaried condition of the image because the image exceeds form, breaking the surface of representation in the process. In this respect, the image is excessive, and part of this excessive is monstrous, drawing in some way the fault lines within presence. The image is of the order of the monster. The monstrum is a prodigious sign which warns, monio, monstrum, of a divine threat. The German word for image, Bild, which designates the image in its form or fabrication, comes from a root, Bill, that designates a prodigious force or a miraculous sign. It is in this sense that there is a monstrosity of the image. Page 22. Partly what is signified is the way the image is a tearing away in order to reveal the depthless underside of its presentation. For Nancy, this feature is the source of the relationship between the image and violence. In both figures, the excess of signs, whilst also exceeding its signs. Images embrace us. They open up to us and close themselves to us insofar as they conjure up in us something that we would call an interior experience.
George Didier Huberman.
Often, when we pose our gaze to an art image, we have a forthright sensation of paradox. What reaches us immediately and straightaway is marked with trouble, like a self-evidence that is somehow obscure. George D.D. Huberman, Confronting Images.
Last one.
In discussing Freud and the topic of dream figuration, D.D. Huberman develops the way that Freud approached the question of the figurable form from the perspective of the rend at work. Rather than leading to a romantic conception of the unfigurable, Freud advanced the idea of the dream's inability to express. This implied that logical relations can be taken into account with dream thoughts, but by means of appropriate disfiguration. The rend functions in a dream as a motor-like force between desire and constraint. It is within the constraining movement, hollowing out the representation, that the rend opens the figure, page 154, and calling it forth within its presentation. It is this process or detour through which the elaborative complexity of the dream work is opened, with proliferating figures and incessant constellations and productions in its wake. Within unconscious formation, Freud insists that distortion is at play within symptom formation.
Next.
In 1971, Araki took his wife Yoko Araki on their honeymoon, during which he created the series of photographs Sentimental Journey, a personal portrait that firmly established his individual vision as a photographer. Sentimental Journey is my love and also an act of determination on my part as a photographer. I photographed my honeymoon trips, so these... I can't read the bottom of the page.
Oh, these are my realist photographs.
A human being is nothing more than a life spent attentively passing through an assemblage of countless scenes. You can say life is transitory and live it at that. But when I wonder where on earth a certain scene from a certain time and a certain period disappeared to, for me that is not sentimentality, but rather a feeling close to irritation. All people lose their scenes one after another. Another way of expressing this is to call it an exasperation with time. Time is not something that comes pressing down on each of us. Recalling scenes that are being lost is simultaneously presaging scenes of the death that is to come.
Mary Alma. That's one.
In the book Gestures of Ethical Life by David Michael Kleinberg-Levin, he states that the manifest etymology of the word gesture, though ultimately withdrawn into the spectral, unquestionably connects the gesture to the process of gestation, to giving birth, to carrying and bringing forth into action. Authentic gestures are accordingly those that bring forth something new. Such gestures that still carry within them a memory trace of the promise of redemption, are what we might call, borrowing a phrase from Merleau-Ponty, consecratory gestures.
Yes. Wolfgang Ley, Passageway, Inside Outside. Enrico David.
A man is reading a text. Is the next one me? The sculpture is called Life Sentence. The figure itself has a logic, and yet it is impossible. We are left without foundation within experience, and yet we accept. 天主Hey, 2015 exhibition 04.19, Xiamen, China. April the 19th. Now she is driving through the streets of Xiamen with a parachute attached to her vehicle. What a mad thing to do. Sense is in free fall, as the occasional witnesses do not quite believe their eyes. Perhaps not quite believing your eyes is like having them cleaned in order to look twice at all things. It is an invention of a way of being in a city, perhaps a way of announcing presence. Imagine you are falling, but there is no ground. Many contemporary philosophers have pointed out that the present moment is distinguished by a prevailing condition of groundlessness. We cannot assume any stable ground on which to base metaphysical claims or foundational political myths. At best, we are faced with temporary, contingent, and partial attempts at grounding. But if there is no stable ground available for our social lives and philosophical aspirations, the consequence must be a permanent, or at least intermittent state of free fall for subjects and objects alike. Hito stare in freefall, a thought experiment on vertical perspective. I think this appears in my paper as well.
Yeah.
Dissertation. Harris Epaminondas, Untitled Installation 2013. It might have come to me in a dream, but they were slaying Algerians in Paris. The bodies were thrown into the river Seine. A dense fog had descended on Paris that night, as thousands assembled for what had been declared an illegal demonstration. Anyway, it must have been a dream because I cannot recall hearing about this event. Yet I could hear the wells, thuds on bodies, and pistol shots. Why does it eat away at me, this dream? Even if such a thing happened, it is not really connected to my time. Simply speaking, it was elsewhere and remote, but then why so vivid? How can such things happen, even in dreams? I was only a boy and knew nothing of Algeria. But it marked the beginning of a dark descent. I felt such things, dirty walls, repression, torture, all hidden in patterns of denial, marked the world of adults, but at the same time it was difficult to find words for this. A long time has passed since that moment, and now I am dying. Still it returns back to me, but time with the knowledge that such an event had actually occurred. Does this only confirm the darkness of the human soul, that power is capable of accruing anything with its very signature, or that perversion stalks in the wake of the everyday?
Next. Would like to read?
I can try. When sleeping and drowning, life swirls beneath and around her, invisible to human eyes. Low groaning escalate into distant cracks of thunder. Silvers of light flash with a precision and force that betray their seeming delicacy. She thinks of his scar, of the almost ecstatic joy spreading across his face as he told her of the night he swam in lightning. The rolling waves turned violently, breaking rhythm, no longer a gentle embrace. She should leave now, return to the rapidly diminishing shore, come back to her body, her separatedness, lie beside him as though she had never left. Reluctance lingers, and she hesitates too long. Raised up and recaptured, dragged under by a dragging weight, her body sex, resistance, fertile. Every part of her is penetrated, pummeled by the howling sea. Seaweed strangles and binds her limbs. She gives in to the fury, knowing only then will it release her. The skies turn upside down, and as suddenly as she had found herself drowning, she is now expelled, thrown downward land. She lies motionless, half submerged, eyes closed, returning slowly. Rain pours down, washing the salt away, and still it clings to her, seaweed in hair, Medusa wrestling. Esther Teichmann. Figuring time, memory, and history. Sankaijuku Umusuna, memories before history. We should write as we dream. We should even try and write. We should all do it for ourselves. It's very healthy because it's the only place where we never lie. At night, we don't lie. Now, if we think that our whole lives are built on lying, they are strange buildings. We should try and write as our dreams teach us, shamelessly, fearlessly, and by facing what is inside very human being, fear, violence, disgust, terror, shit, invention, poetry. In our dreams, we are criminals. We kill, and we kill with a lot of enjoyment. But we are also the happiest people on earth. We make love as we never make love in life. Helen sick.
So, who's going to begin? Quite a journey.
So much in there. I'm going to start drawing a parallel. It seemed with the text you had with Nancy about the grand image and about the idea of the underside. It seemed to sort of tie into what we were talking about last night with Derrida, last week, when we were talking about that underside of the text.
I mean, of course, they're closely related, Jean-Luc Nancy and Derrida. Nancy was seen as a Derridean, a sort of form of Derridean philosopher. So they're very close in terms of their ideas.
I like the concept of not being able to lie in dreams. It's quite interesting, and it keeps coming up that it's true, and the connections you're not in charge of.
So what does that make artists?
Well,
One stage on. If artists are dreamers, are they also liars or not liars?
I think they lie to get what they want. But I think they're trying to be true as they can, actually. They're trying to be as true to their dreams as they can. I don't know.
Did somebody say that, was it Foucault who said, like, that it was essential for artists to be liars? Because that's what we do. We create.
So there's an interesting knot there, isn't there? In dreaming, art, aesthetic activity, and lies and truth.
To tell a story, you know? Be able to fabricate.
Picasso said something, didn't he? The artist lies in order to tell the truth.
But dreams are different in different cultures. The Aboriginal view of the Australian dream time it's totally different from the Western idea of dreaming.
The Australian proposition is much more to do with the collective unconscious.
The Aboriginal, the text around the dream time made me feel very much like the act, like it was the circularity, the act of dreaming dreamt the world into being, which created the dreaming, and so this sort of continuous recreation, as though all of the dreaming minds are creating the world in order for it to exist. It's sort of.
It also changes the relationship between dream and reality. Makes dream, has the command over reality. But real time is dream time.
that might be the line to the lie that the artists tell.
Mm.
Maybe.
But is it a lie, or are we just creating our reality, which is different to others?
I think sometimes too there is this, like, if you have permission to lie or to consider something a lie or whatever. I think that the word lie too is can be like difficult because it's bad, so we shouldn't do it. But like when you say all artists are liars or lying is a part of an artistic practice, it sort of gives you permission to like let go of needing to be accurate, which takes you away from this idea of mimesis, and sort of stuck in reality, and lets you expand truth into fiction or into, I don't know, now are we at alternate facts? I suppose art is different than politics.
Hey, we don't intend to lie.
Yeah, it's not too much like a lie, maybe illusion kind of thing.
But isn't Jonathan writing as Lily O? That's a lie. Or it's the truth of his alter ego. But I mean, having the freedom to be that character and write her words is like an assumption of persona that is not truth.
I remember there is a slide talking about maybe a movie or media that what you make out of is different from what you think or what you talk. And I think that has this kind of like illusional lie-ish meaning inside. And sometimes the art is not very clear about like reaching to some certain consequences or truth, but it's more like expanding our unconsciousness and telling out something that the speaking language cannot achieve.
I think there's an element of deliberation to keep somebody from the truth in the word lie, and there's a negative connotation to it.
And one of the reasons I fictionalized this thing about is in the time of the Algerian Civil War, or the resistance against the French, there was a demonstration in Paris in which hundreds of people disappeared, and it was denied. It was there was no official account of this event, as if it didn't happen. Everyone just got on with lives and pretended it didn't occur. And it's still not, I don't think it's still today affirmed by the French government that it actually happened, that people were murdered on the streets of Paris in the fog. So as if it was just a fiction. So in other words, to write about it is really difficult, because there's no factual, not really, I mean, there's accounts written about it, but there's not really official documents relating to it.
I think if artists lie, then most people lie. Most people just tell their own reality. Historians lie. They're supposed to tell the exact truth.
It can never be an exact truth, because it's always the perspective from which it's written.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same for anything anyone does. It's
Yeah.
from a different perspective. It can be seen as, it can be taken for whatever it is.
I like to question actually whether artists lie. Politicians lie for the political gain, for example. Historians, a different perspective, present different side of story. Not necessarily lying. For artists to create a dream, etc. But Sherin or Anya mentioned intentional things to distort the truth. In that sense, don't think I can agree with that artists lie to create truth. No, I think a lot of artists actually try to show the side of truth that they believe in. In a way, historians try to, or writers write in certain belief or what they see as more of truth. I think a lot more artists actually engaged in the acting of revealing actually truth or what we believe in truth. Lying somehow has that intention for my own gain, and I don't see many artists actually get involved in that activity.
I think it comes down to lenses. We all operate through our own lenses. And it might not necessarily be lying for your own gain. I don't know why you... I don't know if you can be so simple about it, but it can just be an amplification of the way in which you see the world, that somebody else might not see it. They might disagree. It doesn't make it wrong or a lie.
I mean, there's different versions of the construction of the idea of truth. So truth as proof is different from truth as revealing something. So what a philosopher like Heidegger said about truth is very different from what an empiricist said about truth. So when we go back to look at etymologies of truth, there's different accounts of even the meaning of the word truth.
Yeah, what is the truth? Most things in the world are interpretation of one or a collection of people, and they keep changing it anyway. At least we paint or we make sculptures or we create our own reality.
The presentation. Just think about the presentation today. Made me think about the ritual of telling and listening to dreams, and how much we engage in a creative activity, because there's so much gaps to be filled. It's different than telling a story that's an experience. Is connected to the dream happened, but there's a so we know that when we listen to a dream, we're listening to a fragment of something that was experienced, but and we try to recreate it in our mind. But I guess the fascination with that is the space it has for filling the gaps, or try to make sense of something that can't be really recreated or. But I think I'm more in terms of how listening to dreams is engaging, because it depends on imagination, I think.
There's also this thing that dreams can become a reality, psychologically, that a memory of a dream can become a reality to you over time, like childhood dreams. Sometimes it's difficult to be able to assess whether, unless you have someone that you can ask, how do you know that a dream wasn't real? How do if it's a dream that is so close to reality, how do you know? And what kind of an effect so it becomes your reality.
Yeah, especially if you decide to act upon your dream. So let's say you had a dream and you assume that was like a oracle, that's something you interpret, and then you assume that as a decision you should take in your life, and you take it, and it becomes part of your life. So the dream becomes your life, isn't it? You know, take hold of your life.
There is a slide, I remember it's like saying dream is the primitive thought activity. Is it by Lord Tremont?
Freud.
Freud. Oh, this is by Freud. Primitive thought activity. And I kind of feel it's like a kind of like a truth statement, but it can be also not true. And I remember there's a podcast that I listened to recently talking about constellations and astronomy. So the creation of constellation is actually very, very old age, and it actually formed the original astronomy with the development of like the science. Astronomy becomes separated from the constellation, but the constellation becomes a part of art and culture, which is very beautiful. Like, for example, there is an example of for one constellation in the Western society. It is like people imagine one constellation as the bear's sign, but in Eastern constellation, the same one becomes a spoon, and it is actually kind of like a lie, but it is still very beautiful, and people will memorize it with something that we primitively that can understand.
And also that this thing about kind of waking dreams, you know, like heightened awareness, you know, sort of slipping into what could, you know, potentially feel like an alternative reality, but it's based in reality.
Do you mean daydream?
Yeah, like daydreaming, but with the kind of other level of, you know, that it's part imagination, but it feels partly rooted now. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think I'm alone in this. I think I have spoken to a couple of other people that have experienced. I've had it twice in my life. I mean, they were difficult situations, but that there was a sliding between different places, or a reaching in and a reaching out. I mean, I think there's something I was listening to a podcast earlier about dreaming, actually, memory and dreaming, and there was a reference to the fact that they're starting to do all sorts of experiments about how they can affect people's dreams by, I think it was Coors Beer, did this thing. You could volunteer to be experimented upon, and you basically had to watch this video of all this, of nature and waterfalls and all this kind of, you know, very sort of romantic idea of landscape, and that you had this particular music playing at the time, which had this kind of slight advert feel to it, I presume, for Coors Beer. And then at night, whilst you were sleeping, you had to listen to that soundtrack. You had to agree to listen to it for a certain amount of time. And apparently it's meant to affect, it's meant to sort of implant these kind of ideas into your head. So I'm presuming they're seeing that they can affect how, you know, reach into your dreams, not just your dreams reaching out. But it kind of felt quite disturbing when I heard that. They're also using it for really positive things, but yeah, that was the most negative thing. That they could actually use it to entice you to get addicted to a certain product.
And it reminds me of a conversation between me and my friend. So I have several times that I had the, what is it called, prophetic dream. So I exactly dreamed of what is going to happen next. And not just one time, but several times. And I feel very threatening because it's always something that it's a bad happening, but it actually happened. And my friend said that it is because your brain is like artificial intelligence. So it actually gathered all the information from those happening for you, and so that it let you it automatically work with those information and then tell you what is going to happen. And I feel it's like just the unconsciousness is something very magical, but also it means something it tell you the truth.
I had this I heard this thing on internet, and it's a guy called Jose, who was a Mexican living in America, and a few years ago he had 3 children, and he used to teach his children. The way he would do that, he would sit down and read them a book and ask them to remember things, then he would ask them questions. And one day when he was doing this with his 7-year-old, he noticed something very strange that happened. That before, when he formulated the question in his head, and before he verbalized it, the 7-year-old replied, like, what is the capital of Argentina? I was going to ask, and she said Buenos Aires. And he thought that was very strange, and he worked on that, and they did experiments and practiced it. And he thought, I wonder if my other children can do that. So he started doing it with them, and then on himself, and then he went on to do other things. And it is the first time that I see now he's written a book about it, and he teaches people how to do it. I think there are centers in America that are very expensive, but they can train you, and top CEOs go there to do it. But there is a book called Jose Mind Technique, and I've just got it on audio, and I'm going to listen to it. But it was the first time when I came across something that people call spiritual or an unusual experience. It was sort of explained in a more scientific way, or by that I mean it was reproducible, and one can teach others to do that. It was very interesting. I mean, just because Raja was talking about this experiences, I thought about that. And I can share the name of the book and the group. So it's one way we can use imagination and the subconscious and to bring about reality. And one of the people who taught it and who learned how to do this was interviewed, and he said that this technique obviously works because loads of people are doing it now. Not loads, but about, I don't know, 500 people. And then one of them who learned to do this, he said he managed to make his eyesight better. So he went to his optician and said, my glasses don't work. And the optician said, and he's had bad eyes for many years, that your previous prescription would work. And why don't you use that until we get new lenses for you? So he's managed to make his eyesight better, which is really interesting. There's nothing spiritual about it at all. And it's something we all have, and it's called delta waves, and that they put the brain into delta waves.
There's 3 waves, isn't there? Delta, theta,
and not many people can get to the delta level, but we can easily learn it.
I mean, alpha rhythm is where you absorb new information fastest and most efficiently. So very often in the state of just before you're half asleep, half awake, a lot of artists experience very creative, very small amount of time in which a lot of brain activity seems to take place, in which you configure your ideas.
A lot of inventors and scientists get the answer in their dream. That the person who invented the sewing machine saw all of that in his dream.
There's a really wonderful TED Talk that I can share if you guys want it, called The Moment of Inspiration, which talks about what Jonathan was just talking about, that this, and Anya was sharing too, that all the information that you've gathered during the day functioning in the background. So when you get into the shower, or you're going on a long walk, or you're doing something that engages your body enough to let your mind actually detach from its rumination and just float, that it's in those moments when you're taking long drives or about to fall asleep that the puzzle assembles and reassembles itself, whether it's mathematics or painting or whatever it is. And then you get that aha as soon as you stop trying to put it together and you just let the mind work the puzzle on its own without even being aware of it. It was a really interesting talk by a neuroscientist on just that.
I remember when I was at medical school, we'd get, for exams, we'd get 300, 400 MCQs, and we had to just go through them really fast. And I remember I would get to questions that, there would be questions that I knew the answer, but I couldn't remember it at the time. I didn't have time to sit there and think about them. And I would tell my brain, go and find it. And I would mark that question and would just move down. And like 50 questions later, it would just like a light bulb go bing, and I would just go. So I think our brain is much more capable than, I mean, we know it, but it's not easy to, it's not difficult to harvest all that potential. I think it can be as easy as just telling our brain what to do. I even did an experiment. With the power of the brain, there was a cream that I was allergic to. Every time I put it on, I had a rash, an itchy rash. And I thought, well, let me do an experiment. I put the cream on, and before I did it, I told my brain, tell my body not to react. I am not going to get a rash. I'm going to put the cream on, and it will be absolutely fine. I will not get a rash. Whatever you're doing, just tell my body not to get a rash. And I put the cream, obviously, and I didn't get a rash. And I really loved that. But it's difficult to, sometimes I think we have like all these negative thoughts people talk about, that if you want it to happen, you have to believe in it. I think the reason is because when you think that, well, it might not happen, it may be that we're telling our brain or our body that that is a possibility, so that brings it into a reality. How did we get to this talk?
I have a similar story. I have a friend, her mother is allergic to water.
Allergic to water?
Water.
It's impossible.
And but it is.
You die if you're allergic.
No. Just like a little bit allergic to water, and they diagnose it. And they just like tell themselves. So when her mother was very young, it was diagnosed as allergic to water and also to rice and to many things. So they decide not to, they decide just to take a little bit every day. And then when her mother grew up, it disappeared. It's just so amazing. And maybe that is how the immune system like getting the signal of like how you're going to be recovered gradually, and then you can recover. Also for many like cancel many things that the doctor will like tell you is to keep yourself happy and relaxed, and then maybe the cancer just go away.
Can I ask you a question, Jonathan, about Moriyama? Can I ask you, are there books that we can read that he's written, or is he writing texts to go with the artwork that he's making?
He wrote, when he published photographs, he often wrote an essay. So invariably he wrote essays in some fabulous collections of his stories.
So they've been published as a collection?
There's just publications where there's collected writings. I mean, funny, I talked to him once in a talk. He was giving a talk in the Tate. I said, "You're a really interesting writer." He said, "What? I can't write." I said, "No, you're really interesting." I persuaded him he was an interesting writer, which he was in denial of. But I think his writing's fabulous.
I think it is too, and every time you use it, I always think it's such an amazing sort of turn of phrase or an insight into his creative process, the way he sees the world.
Yeah. Beautiful phrasing and an edge between talking as a photographer and talking as a sort of, I mean, he sort of almost photographed hypnotically. He would take his camera out and keep it. It wouldn't go through the lens. He photographed just holding his camera at his side, and he'd discover he'd got a photograph afterwards. He never had a feeling that he was photographing this or that. I mean, occasionally there's something intended, but a lot of the time he'd go into a state of mind where he was in a trance, walking through the city.
And how old is he when he's doing this work?
I mean, he started in the 60s. I mean, he's in his late 70s or 80s now. He mainly photographed in Shinjuku, in Tokyo.
Mm-hmm. And so he's writing in his second language too, isn't he, if he's Japanese?
He was writing in Japanese, translated.
Ah, okay.
But he was...
I just Googled, he was born in 1938, so he's 84.
Yeah. He's a young man still. But he, I was part of that generation who did, they did a magazine called Provoke, and a lot of it was sort of demonstrations and resistance, and he photographed a lot of clubs and nightlife and the underside of Tokyo, the unofficial side of Japanese culture. And he wasn't taken up in the art world until the last maybe 15, 20 years. But he was just seen as not a documentary photographer even, but a sort of outsider of the art world. So he came very late. His position in the art world didn't really arrive until maybe 20 years ago. And he did collections of photographs which were almost abstract. It was influenced by Warhol and Warhol's prints. And he did a lot of, it includes sprocket holes and out of focus and blurry and grainy images to the point where you could hardly work out the image anymore.
They just all have this sort of underbelly feeling, this sort of intense, energetic, sort of repulsive, but you can't help but look at them. You can't help but be a voyeur.
Yeah, there's something about Iraqi, the photographer, is much more collected and much more in focus and much more self-conscious of being a sort of devil. Whereas you get with Maruyama, sort of feeling that he wouldn't even know what a devil is, or what a devil is or isn't. They're dark, but they're also innocent as well. I just remembered what Adorno said about truth. He said, truth is that which doesn't fit. I think it's very elegant, very sparse. So it's the opposite of what we assume to be true, which is how reality fits together. We make a document which is true. This is the world. Adorno subverts that by saying it's what doesn't fit. And that can be the basis of understanding the aesthetic position of an artist, exploring what doesn't really fit together or cohere in any obvious pattern. And modernity is anti-mimetic, which is anti the representation in a way, against representation or beyond representation. A representation is a grid which fits over the world and makes a picture, which is based on a stable identity. So in a way, dream work destroys stable identity. It makes us doubt what is true and what's real. It addresses us, it makes us go towards gaps and frisons and leads us astray. So the artist is some being that doesn't mind going astray, doesn't mind presenting kind of half-life or half-light or threshold state where seeing is no longer believing. So the artist, in a way, disturbs reality principle. And the artist just has to endure that pressure of not being right. Being doubted, or putting things into brackets and doubting the bracket, or exposing the device, going underneath something to the other side of things. And you're pushed into a thing where you have to fictionalize, because in fiction you find a loosening up of the principle of truth. You suspend what's real and what's not real. You make the audience or the reader or whatever think again or be again or recompose or deform. That's why those quotes on Benjamin and Bachelard, the imagination deforms. So the artist works with deformation, which is where reality comes apart, where the true comes apart, where the stable comes apart. And that's what's at question, is the stability of identity. We're going to regions, or the artist goes into regions which are unstable. They don't have a pre-existing stability to give them authority. I think that doesn't answer, but it places a different. The artist isn't exceptional, but seeks out what is exceptional and endures that tension between not necessarily being exceptional, but seeking out which are conditions which are exceptional. I think we're time's up.
Yeah.
Next week's on the question of eroticism.
Did we have something? Do we have a written?
We're doing a writing
task
after that. A week after we're doing it.
Okay. Oh, and have you set it already? Because I wasn't here last week, or is
I'll set it.
You're going to set it up afterwards. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, it could be writing on a single object of choice or a single situation of choice. So rather than the exact same task, kind of seeing where writing could take us. I mean, this last lecture, there's 3 pieces of fiction which finished it all. 2 writings which were fictional, and 1 which was on dream and the role of writing. And there's the Mariama writing. So there's examples of writing there which could be exemplars of a certain way of approaching writing. Does anyone know what Bataille said about eroticism? What is erotic opposed to sexual?
The sexual being that which is explicitly seen, and the erotic being that which is implied or unseen or withheld. Right?
I would add, sorry.
Yeah.
I would add maybe the beautification of sex, eroticism. Somehow there is sort of appreciation of the sexuality, sensuality.
Bataille said that eroticism is sexuality unto death. So it's the two drives, the drive of Eros and the drive of Thanatos. Where it crosses over is erotic. So it's sort of radically different from purely the sexual or Eros, where two drives meet. So anyway, next week's on the question of drives. It follows from the dream. That's why I wanted to follow through the dream with the thing on the erotic, but focusing on drives as an issue. And Freud had two main drives, which is taken from the Greeks, Eros and Thanatos. And I want to show some film clips. Patrick, you've been quiet tonight.
I guess I've been reading quite a lot about dreams in a way, right? Because I've been reading, but at a quite different angle, right? Because all of that is the unconscious as the creative unconscious, as Deleuze would put it, right? Or Nietzsche, but and radically anti the idea of faculties, and radically anti the idea of Freud, and it's a unconscious that is outside of sense or any containment would be his approach, and of course it borders on madness at times, schizophrenia. So I guess so, and this is all leading to a contest between Freud's death drive and Deleuze's interpretation. Freud arguing that everything comes back to death and holding everything within the human, and Deleuze fighting that that's just not true. That's not what drives the subconscious. I have been reading a lot about it, but I think this is post-Kant, quite post-Kant. There's a couple of interesting things that I did read recently. One was, which I think relates to something you were saying, and something that Deleuze was exploring, which was a comment by Hegel, that somewhere between the subject and the object that Kant describes as a monster lurking. And I think that's what Deleuze was bringing out in his idea of these dreams and the subconscious. And that, of course, relates to the body, where organs and what Artaud was talking about, and what's inside the crack. And I was kind of thinking about that stuff.
We could have had another half an hour on that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think it leads into what you were talking about, actually, into sexuality, right? And this play between desire and pleasure, which is a big thing for Nietzsche, right? And a big thing, and I think then that's the contention. What is the will to power? Is it about what is driving things? And that's against Freud. Is an argument between Freud and Nietzsche, right? Which is embedded in this idea of eroticism.
And of course, there's the origins of the unconscious in both Jena Romanticism and idealism of Schelling and Hegel could be taken in a lot of different directions.
I think Freud was really following Schopenhauer, right, in his own view of things. And Nietzsche was against it, fighting against it.
Well, that's a good way of finishing up. Something to think about. So next week, and there's a letter being sent out for the show at Leipzig. And we'll begin from next week. We'll have a short discussion next week about where people are at with what they want to do. I think there was a feeling that we wanted to do something which was more a different format to the last one, something more thought which could be expended upon it. But we'll see where we go. So next week, same time, same place, in the land of nowhere.
See you then.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. See you. Yeah, thanks.